The dining room went still, not because of the prime rib my stepmother had spent hours fussing over, or the polished silverware that made the evening feel unbearably stiff. No, it was because of what my father had just hurled across the table. "You're the biggest disappointment this family's ever seen," he sneered, voice slurred with spite. "You never should have been born." The words hit harder than fists. Silence gripped the room. My cousin's mid-bite froze. My uncle's knife clattered onto his plate. Even my older sister, the family prodigy, looked away awkwardly. I sat at the far corner of the massive oak table, not by accident, but by design. They always made sure I was an afterthought. I blinked, willing my face to stay blank. No tears. Not this time. Only the steady tapping of my grandfather's walking stick broke the silence. Tap, tap, tap. Then, crack. At 86, Grandpa still had a presence that could command a battlefield. He shoved himself to his feet, his cane striking the marble with a loud, jolting slap. "Enough!" he roared, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. The dog under the table whined in fright. My father started to speak, but Grandpa silenced him with a sharp wave of his hand. "You think she's a mistake," Grandpa growled, sweeping the room with a glare. "You think she's the failure?" He jabbed his cane toward me. "That young woman is the only one here who still has the heart this family was built on." Everyone stiffened. He turned to me, eyes softening. "Avery, tell them what you told me last Thursday." My heart hammered, my hand shook. But when he nodded, I found my voice. 3 months ago," I said, voice quivering but growing stronger, "I saved the family company from foreclosure." A stunned gasp rippled around the table. I did it quietly, bought the debt under a different name. I wasn't looking for praise. I swallowed hard. I did it because Grandpa's legacy mattered to me, even when none of you did. The weight of my confession pressed down on the room. Finally, my father broke the silence, voice hoarse and defensive. "That's not possible. She doesn't even..." "Taught her," Grandpa cut in sharply. His cane tapped the floor once, emphatic. "Every Saturday morning. Business, finance, negotiation. While you were all too busy ignoring her, I was teaching her to lead." The room shifted. My cousin shoved his plate away. My sister's hands gripped the table's edge. My stepmother just sat there, lips parted, stunned. I stared down at my untouched dinner. For the first time in my life, their silence wasn't suffocating. It was mine to command. But the story wasn't over yet. Grandpa reached into the inside pocket of his worn navy blazer, the one he wore to every gathering, the one everyone sneered at behind his back. With steady fingers, he pulled out a creased envelope and slid it across the gleaming table toward my father. "What's this?" my father barked, clinging to his last scraps of authority. "Open it," Grandpa said quietly, not loud, not angry. But his words carried the force of a storm. The air vibrated with tension. My father hesitated, then tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of faded paper, handwritten in my grandfather's neat cursive. As my father read, his face drained of color. His hands, once tight with arrogance, shook. "I wrote that 27 years ago," Grandpa said, voice strong, addressing the entire table. "When your mother found out she was pregnant again, everyone whispered it was a mistake. An accident." His gaze swept across the table. But it wasn't. I held my breath. Grandpa turned to me, his eyes burning with pride. "Avery wasn't an accident. She was the child I begged for." A stunned gasp rippled through the room. "Doctors had told me I wouldn't make it through the year," he continued. "I asked for a reason to keep fighting, a legacy worth living for." He nodded slowly toward my father. "You were my heir by name." His voice softened as he looked at me. "But Avery was my heir by choice. A child meant to be raised with heart, not with all this noise and pride," Grandpa said, his voice steady. "Someone who could carry forward the values this family lost a long time ago." He turned to me, a faint smile ghosting his face. "You were born 6 months later, Avery. And the day I first held you, something changed." His laugh was rough but warm. Doctors called it a miracle when my illness reversed itself. He shook his head gently. I call it a second chance. My throat tightened. You never told me this, I whispered. Because it wasn't time, Grandpa said, his eyes shining. But now it is. The table was frozen, every person too stunned to speak. Even my stepmother, who usually wore smugness like perfume, sat motionless. My sister's perpetual smirk had vanished. My father looked like he'd been punched. So you planned this? He snapped. I prayed for her, Grandpa barked back. And I kept praying. His voice shook with feeling. I watched you mock her, exclude her, call her worthless. I said nothing because I needed to know if she would break. Grandpapa's hand gripped the cane tighter, his knuckles white. But she didn't. Avery stayed kind. She stayed strong, even when you gave her nothing but scraps. Even when she sat at this table invisible. He turned to me, voice gentler now. I am sorry I didn't defend you sooner. I shook my head. Tears stung behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. You were always there, Grandpa, in your own way. A different kind of silence fell, heavier, more ashamed. My cousins avoided my gaze. My uncle opened his mouth, but no words came out. But Grandpa wasn't done. Because the letter, that was just part of the truth. The weight of the moment pressed down harder. Grandpa took a long, slow breath, then eased himself back into his chair. There's something else, he said, almost whispering. He nodded toward the old cabinet in the corner, the one crammed with forgotten photo albums and dusty trinkets. Bring me the black folder. My younger cousin, silent for once, fetched it without question. Grandpa opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of clipped documents, crisp, official-looking papers. He laid them out on the table. This, he said firmly, is my will. My father paled visibly. You already have a will. We all saw it last Christmas. Grandpa's smile was faint but sharp. No, he saw the version meant for appearances. A child meant to be raised with heart, not with all this noise and pride, Grandpa said, his voice steady. Someone who could carry forward the values this family lost a long time ago. He turned to me, a faint smile ghosting his face. You were born 6 months later, Avery, and the day I first held you, something changed. His laugh was rough but warm. Doctors called it a miracle when my illness reversed itself. He shook his head gently. I call it a second chance. My throat tightened. You never told me this, I whispered. Because it wasn't time, Grandpa said, his eyes shining. But now it is. The table was frozen, every person too stunned to speak. Even my stepmother, who usually wore smugness like perfume, sat motionless. My sister's perpetual smirk had vanished. My father looked like he'd been punched. So you planned this, he snapped. I prayed for her, Grandpa barked back. And I kept praying. His voice shook with feeling. I watched you mock her, exclude her, call her worthless. I said nothing, because I needed to know if she would break. Grandpa's hand gripped the cane tighter, his knuckles white. But she didn't. Avery stayed kind, she stayed strong, even when you gave her nothing but scraps, even when she sat at this table invisible. He turned to me, voice gentler now. I'm sorry I didn't defend you sooner. I shook my head. Tears stung behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. You were always there, Grandpa, in your own way. A different kind of silence fell, heavier, more ashamed. My cousins avoided my gaze. My uncle opened his mouth, but no words came out. But Grandpa wasn't done. Because the letter, that was just part of the truth. The weight of the moment pressed down harder. Grandpa took a long, slow breath, then eased himself back into his chair. There's something else, he said, almost whispering. He nodded toward the old cabinet in the corner, the one crammed with forgotten photo albums and dusty trinkets. Bring me the black folder. My younger cousin, silent for once, fetched it without question. Grandpa opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of clipped documents, crisp, official-looking papers. He laid them out on the table. This, he said firmly, is my will. My father paled visibly. You already have a will. We all saw it last Christmas. Grandpa's smile was faint but sharp. Oh, you saw the version meant for appearances. No, Grandpa said, his voice cutting clean through the tension. You saw the will I wanted you to see. The real one was updated 6 months ago. Why? My aunt whispered, her voice cracking. Why would you hide that from us? He didn't answer her. His gaze was fixed only on me. I made the changes the day Avery saved the company, he said simply. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Yipping. Grandpa nodded, a small, proud smile forming. You're the sole heir now. The room exploded. My uncle shot up from his chair. That's ridiculous. My stepmother gasped audibly. She's not even qualified. My sister barked. She's a barista, for God's sake. But Grandpa slammed his hand against the table with a force that silenced them all. Enough. His eyes were sharp, unyielding. She's the only one who deserves it. I watched all of you waste every opportunity I gave you. You wore the family name like a trophy, but none of you honored it. He turned his gaze to my father, and it was ice. You taught your daughter shame. His voice broke slightly. I taught her strength, and now Avery will carry this name into the future. I sat frozen, the weight of his words almost too much to absorb. Me? The heir? The one they had always treated like a mistake? You made me executor of the fake will? My father growled through clenched teeth. No, Grandpa snapped back. I made her executor of the real one. A visible shudder passed through my father. He said nothing more because somewhere deep down he knew he had already lost. But I wasn't gloating. I didn't feel superior. I just felt complete. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, respected, like I hadn't endured the isolation for nothing. And yet, Grandpa wasn't finished. There's one more thing, he said, a glimmer of something in his eye. He reached beneath his chair and pulled out a small wooden box, the same battered box I'd once seen him weep over, back when I was too young to understand. The box creaked open in his weathered hands. It looked plain, smooth wood, no lock, no markings. But I remembered. I was 8 years old the first time I saw it, hidden away in his study. I remembered the glimpse of photographs, the quick, gentle way he had closed it again. One day, you'll understand, he had whispered then. That day had finally come. He set the box before me, his hand steady despite the tremor in his fingers. Go on, Avery. I brushed my fingers over the lid and opened it. Inside were bundles of letters tied with faded twine, yellowed photos, and a small velvet pouch. I picked up the first letter carefully. It was my mother's handwriting. I glanced up, startled. Across the table, my stepmother sat stiffly, her gaze locked on her plate, her face a mask of unreadable emotion. The letter trembled in my hands. It was addressed to Grandpa, written on the day I was born. I don't know if I'm ready for this, it began. I'm scared. But she has your eyes, Papa, and your fire. My throat tightened painfully. If I fail, please raise her right. Not to chase wealth, not to chase perfection, but to be kind. Beneath the letter, tucked neatly, were photos. Moments I hadn't even known were captured. Me, at 5 years old, gripping Grandpa's hand outside a corner bakery. Me beaming with paint-smeared cheeks at a school art fair. Me curled asleep on his chest, a dusty old novel open in his lap. He had kept everything. I never showed these to anyone, Grandpa said softly. They would have laughed. Mocked you more. His voice thickened with emotion. But I kept them because every time you smiled through their cruelty, Avery, I saw hope. I opened the velvet pouch, hands trembling. Inside was a gold pendant. Tiny, delicate, engraved with one word, legacy. I looked up, blinking back tears. You gave this to Grandma, I whispered. Grandpa nodded. And now it's yours. Why me? I asked, my voice almost breaking. Because you listened, you learned, you never took shortcuts, you never needed praise to do what was right. And that, he smiled gently, that's leadership. Across the table, the silence shifted. It was no longer smug or cruel. It was heavy, ashamed. But I didn't want revenge, not truly. That had never been the point. I rose to my feet, holding the pendant tight. "Grandpa's will stands," I said. "That's not changing." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Even Grandpa blinked, surprised. "But I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm not stripping anyone's titles or homes." I let my gaze find my father's. "I'm not here to punish you." My voice was steady. "I just want you to know. I didn't fail. You did. You failed to see me, and now that burden is yours to carry." I turned back to Grandpa, my voice softening. "But I see you, and I'll protect what you built. Not just the company, the heart of it." He smiled, and a small, proud, bittersweet smile. And just when I thought the storm had passed, Grandpa cleared his throat. "One more thing, Avery," he said, his voice low. "Before I go." Grandpa reached into the wooden box once more and pulled out a weathered, sealed envelope. "This isn't about money, Avery," he said quietly. "It's about blood." My chest tightened. The envelope looked even older than the others, its edges brittle, its seal faded but still unbroken. Grandpa cradled it carefully, as if it carried a pulse. "This," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, "was never meant to be opened unless absolutely necessary." He paused, the weight of the moment crushing the room into stillness. "And tonight is that moment." I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs. All eyes were fixed on us, no one daring to move or speak. Across the table, my father's face had turned a sickly white. My stepmother sat stiff, her knuckles bone pale against the edge of her chair. Grandpa broke the seal with trembling hands and unfolded a single fragile page. His voice, however, was unwavering. "To my beloved father," he read, "if you're holding this, the secret I carried all these years must now be revealed." My stomach dropped. The child I bore on that cold December night was not James' daughter. She belongs to another. Gasps cut through the room. I froze, the world tilting under me. He was kind, gentle, a man I met before the marriage was arranged. We had only a few precious weeks. But when I learned I was pregnant, I knew, and I chose to stay silent for the sake of the family's name. Grandpa's voice cracked as he looked up at my father. "Avery isn't your biological daughter." My father surged to his feet, his chair screeching back. "Lies," he barked. "You expect me to believe this now?" But Grandpa didn't blink. "I had a DNA test done last month," he said steadily. "I needed to be certain before I handed her everything." He slid the sealed lab report across the table. My father stared at it like it was poison. "You hated her," Grandpa said, voice rough with grief. "Because deep down, you always knew." "Finally," my stepmother whispered hoarsely, "I loved him, but I stayed for the family." I rose slowly, my legs shaky but my voice clear. "I never needed to be your daughter," I said to my father. "I only ever wanted to be part of this family. Even when you gave me nothing." He said nothing, just crumbled silently. I turned to Grandpa. "What do I do now?" His eyes shone with fierce love. "You lead, Avery. You heal, and you build something better than what we were." And I did. In the months that followed, I rebuilt the company with heart, not pride. I funded scholarships in Grandma's name, launched programs for struggling employees, and slowly they began to see me. My father never apologized, but one morning he left a note on my desk. "You've done more for this name than I ever did." Maybe that's what scares me the most. I smiled, because the truth had set us free. I was never their mistake. I was the miracle they never deserved, but the one they desperately needed. If my story resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below. Your support means more than you know. Together, we can build a community where kindness, resilience, and quiet strength are seen and celebrated. Your words matter, just like you do.